Hello and welcome to my fourth Let's Read video where I go through magazines from my career writing for magazines, video game magazines, back in the late 1999, early 2000s when I got my start. This is Expert Gamer number 67, the January 2000 issue, which means we probably were working on this in November of 1999. We would have finished around the end of November 1999, or probably the middle of November 1999, and then this would have been on the shelves during Christmas. So yeah, I'm trying something a little bit different here. So hopefully you'll bear with me because I'm going to have to do a lot of editing for this in post, to use the proper editor lingo. Because for this issue, well, first of all, let's look at this cover. So Donkey Kong 64. This is a big deal for Nintendo and for the N64. I think in hindsight, a lot of us would probably agree that Donkey Kong 64 did not turn out all that great. But it was a big deal at the time. It was getting covers everywhere, and of course that was included on Expert Gamer. And the thing that I was going to talk about that I am trying this time is that this strategy in particular, as well as WWF Wrestlemania 2000 strategy, were written by Todd Zuniga, who you might know on, if you follow him at all, you follow him on social media. He goes by Adrian Zuniga now. But anyway, I reached out to Todd, and we had a great discussion, a little bit of reminiscing for about 45 minutes. And I asked him a couple questions about working on this strategy in particular. So I have that recorded, and I'm going to splice in some of that conversation to this video. So again, bear with me. I have never done this before, because these Let's Reads are done pretty much live and with no scripting, just a few notes. So we'll see how that goes. In the meantime, yeah, so Donkey Kong 64 being the cover story. For me, I actually did two strategies in this issue as well. Sega Rally 2 for the Dreamcast, which I was excited about because it was the first racing strategy that I'd ever worked on. And Tomb Raider: The Last Revelation, which I was also kind of excited about because I was a big Tomb Raider fan. Still am. Although I will say that by Tomb Raider: The Last Revelation, which I think was the fourth game, maybe the fifth game, the shine was coming off on this series. So, as anyone who's played it will probably know. Also covered of this issue, Twisted Metal 4, Turok Rage Wars, and again, Vandal Hearts 2, Medal of Honor, WrestleMania 2000. When you consider that this is, I think, a little over 100 pages long, that is a lot of games to fit into these pages. Also, when you consider the fact that there are pages and pages of tricks in here. Anyway, let's get started. Oh, and I point out, as I have before, we had to find a way to get Pikachu on the cover, so of course we did that. Every month we tried to get a Pokemon, specifically Pikachu if possible, mention on the cover. So you'll see in here how we, there we go, 140 pages, how we got Pokemon in the issue this time. So, opening up, first page ad, Suikoden 2, actually a game that we had covered in the previous issue of Expert Gamer at number 66. Temporary relief of Dragon's Breath, Monster Pains, or Battle Fatigue, take 2, as often as needed. Generally considered a classic, and I don't blame anybody who thinks that way. It's a great game. It's kind of a weird ad. I guess it's eye-catching. And I'll be honest, I've never played through Suikoden 2, although Todd, who you'll be hearing from later in this episode, did. He did the strategy guide on Suikoden 2. Over here on the bio page, I'm going to try to make sure I keep this in frame. I need to get a better setup for this so I can actually see the frame as I'm recording this. But over here on the bio page, we have, of course, bio by our brave editor-in-chief, John Riccardi. Riccardi's fallen way behind in his game playing ever since he took over as the IC of this here mag. While everyone else at the office is roaring through tomorrow's big games like Gran Turismo 2, which we will cover in the next issue, 68, Saga Frontier 2, and Donkey Kong 64, he's still stuck on Disc 2 of Final Fantasy 8. Heck, he hasn't even finished Resident Evil 3 yet, which is just sad. As a result, he's promised to get all caught up before the turn of the century. Either that, or he's going to take the month of January off. Yeah, remember Y2K. We were getting close. Like, as I said, we would have been working on this 4 to 6. We would have finished it 4 to 6 weeks before the end of the year. Interesting, he still has Resident Evil 3 Nemesis as one of his favorites. Dan Leahy, managing editor, who ended up being the editor-in-chief when this magazine became Game Now. Dan's been getting his DCM groove on this month, and it's been seriously cutting into his gaming time. I assume DCM is Dreamcast magazine. It was probably a series of special issues that we released through Ziff Davis. Still, he found time to work his way up the New Office Soul Calibur chart, number 6 with Riccardi in his crosshairs, and he got to attend a double top secret showing of Siphon Filter 2, more next month. In other news, Dan and his wifey bought a house so he could be a little closer to the meat grinder called work. Aw, how sweet. Now get back to work. John adding in his parentheses. Dan in a word, Mitsurugi. Oh, John in a word. Forget about it. That's John's New York City upbringing. Andy Barron never wanted to get enough World War II history. Andy's not only been working on Medal of Honor, he's also been buying up every war DVD known to man. Saving Private Ryan and Stalingrad are his 2 latest acquisitions. He also returned to his love of vehicular combat this month with Twisted Metal 4. Although it's a good game, he wishes it was a little bit harder. This month went by real fast for Andy thanks to all the movies, holidays, and of course, work. Andy in a word is war. Jim Zurich. Jim got so excited about Gran Turismo 2 this past month, they got into a car wreck power sliding his way around the corner on his way home from work one night. I'm sure that's not how it happened, but it is worth pointing out. Jim actually did get in a car wreck. I remember him walking around during work on this issue with a neck brace on for a lot of the time. His car looks like it went head-to-head with Sweet Tooth from Twisted Metal 4. Fortunately for Jim, he survived the mass carnage with nary a scar. In fact, somehow he's come away from the wreck with incredibly acute Soul Calibur skills. Now he has his sights set on the Office Soul Cali crown. Jim in a word, bionic. Todd Zuniga, who's all neck. And again, it goes by Adrian now. He's who I spoke to for this issue. Our resident Poke Freak was off in Seattle most of the month, chilling at a Nintendo HQ, where he trudged his way through the first half of Donkey Kong 64 with layout master, TM, Kerry Wise. When he wasn't monkeying around with DK, he was either losing money at Soul Calibur, drooling over NBA 2K's visuals, or trying to drag poor Kerry across the border to Vancouver in order to get a glimpse of his blues in action. Talk about an obsessed fan. Sheesh. Todd, in a word, drunk. So I reached out to Todd about this because I was curious about how this Donkey Kong 64 strategy had been put together, and he's hinting there that he went to Redmond to do it. So I reached out to him to talk to him about it, and I'll put some clips in here.
I have no memory of this. That was my favorite part of you asking me to do this. I'm like, I have no memory of doing this. But then when it said that Kerry Wise, the layout master, M-A-S-T-A-H, with a trademark, which also is funny because your bio has a master with an H, but no trademark. This is the kind of writing we were capable of.
This is that was a great example of what I was talking about, where it's like I'm reading what this kid wrote 20 years ago, and I wouldn't have let that happen, right? But so we were all clearly using the same vocabulary.
Yeah.
So,
wait, was it your bio? Because I remember not reading your bio, so now I'm like, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, it's my bio. Yeah, Whirly Ball Master.
So I did read your bio. Okay. I remember the Whirly Ball. That was wild.
Oh yeah, I loved Whirly Ball.
So good. So I don't remember, but then reading Kerry Wise was there, and I was like, oh wow, did I go up? So I feel like I went up for like 2 weeks and played this game, but it sounds so crazy. But I don't know.
It sounds Nintendo. That's what I'm saying. I mean, and that we had that happening on different games, because I remember, this is much later on, but like when we were reviewing Metal Gear Solid 2. I don't know if you did that for OPM, but I know I think Crispin and Mark and maybe John Dudlack all went for EGM, and they went out to California for 2 weeks or a week or something like that and played through. Right, so it wasn't unheard of, and Nintendo was weird like that, so that's why I was curious.
Yeah, it says I went for a month, so most of the month. I can't imagine I went for more than a week. Like, how is that sane? But at the most 2 weeks, because also, these games just take time to play. Yeah, sorry, I know I'm blowing up this interview by not remembering any of this.
Oh,
that's kind of my favorite part. But yeah, so I just have no recollection of this happening, and now like something is filtering and brewing, and I'm like, so I'm sort of grabbing and being like, I get like the fact that Carrie was there. Maybe we had to go and do it together, and that sort of makes me believe something happened. But I don't know. It's very strange.
So yeah, Todd's a little bit fuzzy on whether or not he actually wrote the strategy guide for Donkey Kong 64 while spending time in Redmond, Washington, but he definitely remembers going. So yeah, I'm guessing he probably did have to go there to do this strategy guide, but who knows? And last but not least, my bio, Greg Whirlyball Master Stewart worried us a tad this month. He kept running around the office making revving noises and shouting, "Very long, easy right, maybe." It's a terrible first line. Nonetheless, his Sega Rally 2 guide is guaranteed to help improve your best times in Sega's Super Hot DC Racer. Now he's polishing up his NHL 2000 skills so he can take on all comers in the upcoming office-wide tournament. The Penguins will reclaim their lost glory. And in John's parentheses, Penguins, and he's from Canada. Greg, in a word, abused. I got a lot of crap for being from Canada. Right off the bat, you'll see in the masthead, well, Andy and Jim are associate editors. Todd is an assistant editor. I'm listed as our Canadian friend. But anyway. Yeah, so Whirlyball is something that I don't know if it's still prominent. I don't know if you haven't played it yet, and it's possible to play it, you should. There was a place a few blocks away from our office where you could go play Whirlyball, and we used to take some of the publishers and the PR people who came, especially Robert Fleischer, I think was his name, his last name. We all called him the Pickle King, not for gross reasons. He just had a real thing about pickles. But anyway, we would go there and play Whirlyball. And Whirlyball, I can only describe as like lacrosse, but played in bumper cars. And if I can find some footage of what Whirlyball is, I will absolutely put that here. But yeah, Whirlyball was a weird thing. That was so much fun. So anyway, yeah, Whirlyball. We played a lot of it. Current favorite, Sega Rally 2. You Don't Know Jack. I was really into You Don't Know Jack on the PC for a while. And Tomb Raider, The Last Revelation. I can't imagine that was actually a favorite. And I think we talked about this last month, but I always loved that we put in pictures of the art guys. So these were the guys that did our layouts. And Tim laid out the whole magazine, as well as Justin, who was our newish copy editor at the time. And I love that it was listed as just for the moms. It was great. Dragon Warrior Monsters ad for Game Boy Color. I never did play Dragon Warrior Monsters, although I did love the fact that Dragon Warrior like 1, 2, and 3 got re-released for Game Boy Color. I'd played through 1 on the NES, but I hadn't really played 2 or 3, and I never played 4 on the NES. So I was super excited to get to play them on the Game Boy Color. It's interesting that this is published by IDOS. This was, I think, still... NX, I think, had a North American presence at this point, but I guess they didn't publish this alone. Terrible CG-rendered characters, especially the human face. Ugh. But it is what it is. It's 2000, after all. Late 1999. Standard Resident Evil 3 Nemesis ad. I'm sure we saw this last month as well. Of course, last month, number 66's cover was Resident Evil 3. Jill Valentine resigns from Stars and attempts to escape the nightmarish city in ruins. Yeah. I always did love how the Resident Evil games looked. It's funny, the CG on this compared to the CG characters back here. It's just night and day. Another one of those non-endemic ads we talked about last time. I really liked these Echo ads. I thought they looked really cool. I thought the clothes looked really cool too, but I just loved how they had like the artistic renditions of different parts of the photo there. I always thought it was really neat. Too Short. Is that actually the rapper, Too Short? I have no idea because I wasn't following it at the time, but that might be him. I don't know. Table of contents, pretty standard. Trying to keep this magazine in frame. Mad Cats. So here's a thing that I'd forgotten about until I was working on the weekly commute, which if you're a $5 plus Patreon supporter, you will hopefully have watched. The Mad Catz Dreamcast gun. So I did a thing on the weekly commute recently about the House of the Dead 2 and had mentioned I had forgotten that Sega had removed support, and I don't think they ever released the Dreamcast gun that they had released in Japan for the system, and they'd removed support for the Dreamcast gun for Japan, or for the American version of the game. You could still play with a light gun, but even if you use the Japanese version of the Sega light gun, it wouldn't work. So this was probably the way, if anyone in North America was playing House of the Dead 2 with the light gun, it was probably with one of these Mad Catz guns. It looks pretty similar to the actual Sega version. I remember using this controller too, and I actually really liked it. I liked it a lot for the main reason was because it had the 3/3 button configuration that is not standard at all now, which sucks. I think the diamond-shaped buttons are great, but we were still very much in like fighting games were still super popular, and 3/3 made more sense to me for fighting games, and I was so used to it on the Genesis and the Saturn. So I loved that. I hated that Sega got rid of it for the Dreamcast, and I loved that this controller brought it back. Plus, the Sega Dreamcast D-pad wasn't great. I don't remember if the D-pad on this was any good, but I know the D-pad on the Dreamcast was pretty awful. Another Resident Evil ad, Resident Evil 2 on the N64. Again, we talked about this in the previous video. This is, I think some people consider this to be like the way to play Resident Evil 2 because it was a director's cut. I don't think they call it that, but I think it was one of the most complete ways to play it. Although I have to say, I didn't like the way the N64 version looked all that much, so I think I probably still preferred it on the PlayStation, if I was even playing it. I wasn't really into Resident Evil for quite a while. Gamers Forum, we got the letters. I didn't look too closely at all of these letters, although I did take a quick look at the letter of the month, closed captioned, which I think is oddly relevant today, because, well, let's read it. Closed captioned. So, dear expert gamer, I'm an avid game player. I love to play all games from Nintendo 64, PlayStation, Atari 2600, computers, and every system I ever got the chance to play. There's a lot of good games and bad games. However, I'm deaf, and I can't hear what the games are talking about. For example, Resident Evil. They don't have any text. It's all voices. That disappointed me big time because it would have been worth my money to play it if it had its own text or captions. When I found out that Metal Gear Solid was coming, I really hoped it would have text, but not all of it did. For future games, I wish the developers would make room to add text options so that we can turn text on or off. Let me remind you, there are a lot of deaf people who love to play games. Trust me, I'm one of them. To which we responded, we couldn't agree with you more, Damon. It's such a simple task for developers to include subtitles in their games that it's a wonder it's not done more often. Not only for the deaf gamers out there, but for those of us who simply like to turn the volume down now and then, either because it's late at night or because, darn it, we just like to read. Unfortunately, many development teams suffer pressure from publishers to get their games out by a certain date, and that means anything extra, even a simple thing like subtitles, gets cut in order to make the deadline. It's sad, really, but what can you do? Hopefully, more companies will pay attention to this in the future. Now, I don't know how simple it would have been to do closed captions in video games. I don't feel like it would have been that simple 23 years ago. I'm not saying that it would have been difficult, but I think it would have been an undertaking. And I think that the response is probably right in that, if you're pressed for time, that would be an easy thing to cut. That being said, I have said many times on our podcast and just in general, I love the fact that we've gotten, as an industry, so much better at accessibility options, to the point that I find that, and Microsoft and Sony, and actually Nintendo too, but Microsoft and Sony feel like they've really been leading that charge in recent years, as of I'm recording this in 2023. I think with most Sony games now, when you turn them on, before you really do anything else, you're generally greeted with an accessibility options screen. And Nintendo has done certain things as well. as far as making games easier to play through for gamers who, might not be as skilled at doing it for various reasons. But anyway, when I read this, I was like, here we are 25, 24 years later from when this was written. And I feel like we've come so far as accessibility options go, and that they've become standard. And it's not just for the hearing impaired, it's for the visually impaired as well, or even down to things like color blindness. And also, Microsoft and Sony both with some great accessibility controllers and things like that. I felt it was very relevant even today, and just loved that this was our letter of the month in January of 2000. Was also sort of looking at this. I thought it was interesting to speak to that the top 10 best-selling games of October 1999 in the United States. Number 1, Pokemon Yellow. Number 2, Pokemon Red. Number 3, Pokemon Blue. Number 4, Pokemon Pinball. Number 5, Pokemon Snap. So, top 5 games in October of 1999, all Pokemon games. All Game Boy games except for Pokemon Snap on the N64. Just in case you were ever in doubt about how popular Pokemon was, 25 years ago. Considering that, Pokemon Red and Blue were pretty old at this time, too. Of course, we had covered Pokemon Yellow in the previous issue number 66. The bottom 6, Driver, again, another game that I think a lot of people forget was super popular, Driver. If you go back and play Driver now, it's real hard. And it always amazed me how popular that game was, considering that it didn't really feel that user-friendly. But it was super popular. Final Fantasy VIII, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater. We were definitely on the edge of Tony Hawk becoming this like all-conquering franchise that you had to put on the cover every single time a new version came out. This was when this was starting. Madden NFL 2000 and NASCAR 2000. Again, another thing that I think is important to remember, and I'm working on a long-form video on this that'll probably not be out until like 2024 at the earliest. NASCAR was, at this point in the late 90s, early 2000s, the second most popular spectator sport in the United States. So it's not surprising that it showed up on the top 10, but I think it would be weird, or not weird, but I think it's not something that gamers would have thought would be all that popular, but here we are. I was interested to see that was on there. Japan Top 10, Arc the Lad 3, Super Robot Wars 64, Revive, Derby Stallion 99, Monster Collection, JoJo's Adventure, Pro Baseball Simulator Dugout 99, Dragon Quest 1 and 2 on the Game Boy, I was talking about that earlier, World Soccer Winning 11-4, and Dance Dance Revolution 2nd Remix. I loved the Dance Dance Revolution games. The editor's top 10 are usually stuff that we're covering or currently playing. Soul Calibur, Medal of Honor, Final Fantasy VIII, Donkey Kong 64, FIFA 2000, Sega Rally 2, Resident Evil 3, NBA Live 2000, Vandal Hearts 2, and NBA 2K. Import pick of the month here, Space Channel 5. My main thing about this is, and Sega did bring this here, but I remember when Sega brought this here, Chris Johnston and I, my co-host on Player One Podcast, we were driving to Des Moines, Iowa for a UFC event. It was a press event for the UFC video game, which we'll get to in a later Let's Read video. And that was the week that Space Channel 5, I think it was the day that Space Channel 5 came out. And we stopped on the way at some random Best Buy to buy our copies of Space Channel 5 for the Dreamcast. I don't know why we felt we had to. We were going to Des Moines. We didn't have our Dreamcast with us. We weren't going to get to play it. We could have bought it when we got home, but we decided that we needed to stop and buy our copies of Space Channel 5 for the Dreamcast. That's my memory of Space Channel 5. This was an interesting letter. Ridiculous request. Dear Expert Gamer, I was just wondering if you could email me most of Squaresoft's RPGs. Okay. Sure, and while we're at it, we'll email you a lawyer so you can defend yourself in court for software piracy. Ha-ha! Anyway. So, what a weird letter. Vigilante 8 for the Game Boy, because Vatical would put anything on the Game Boy. This is, of course, Vigilante 8 was kind of like Twisted Metal. It was more or less Twisted Metal. But, sorry, I'm just trying to center this magazine a little bit. But I think, and I don't know, I'll probably have to look this up. I don't know if it's true, but I always thought that the Vigilante 8 series sort of was born out of the Interstate 76 and 82 games that Activision did on the PC, which were quite good. But I just, yeah, I feel like that's where Vigilante 8 came from. I don't remember the Game Boy game being very good. Most Vatical Entertainment Game Boy games weren't very good. Here's something that sort of stuck out too. The Dukes of Hazzard Racing for Home from South Peak Interactive for the PlayStation. I don't remember playing this, although I do remember, in fact, I own, I think, the PlayStation 2 and or Xbox version of the Dukes of Hazzard game. It's interesting to me, and not to get super political here, because I know that's not what people want to come here for, but it's interesting to me. I loved the Dukes of Hazzard when I was a kid. And there's nothing wrong with that show. I still think I would have loved it today. But, of course, the rebel flag on the roof of the car, and I love this car, the General Lee. The rebel flag on the roof of the car, when I was a kid, I had no idea. I think a lot of people didn't know what that flag was all about. It's just interesting that I don't think you'd see that now. If they decided to do a Dukes of Hazzard game now, I don't know why they would. Of course, I don't know why they did here, because it's not like it was on television anymore. But if they would remove the flag, I wonder if they would remove it. I think they should, but I wonder if they would. There was something else here that I wanted to call out. What was it? There was something on this page. Oh, that's what it was. And it was actually, I'll go back to the previous page here. This ladder, Burn Rush, or Bum Rush the Show. Bum Rush the Show. I get it. Dear Expert, Dear Expert Gamer, you guys forgot something pretty cool in the Final Fantasy VI walkthrough, last issue, which was a walkthrough I wrote. Namely, how to get Sabin's final blitz, the Bum Rush. On the continent where Narsh is, find the 5 trees that make a plus. Took me a while to find. And go in there with Sabin in your party. You will then meet his master, Duncan. He will teach you the Bum Rush Blitz. And by the way, what you said about using Pummel on Kefka is whack. Bum Rush deals 999 damage to a single target and makes Pummel look like a nudge. Response. Actually, the top left corner of page 113 in issue 65 gives instructions on how to get Sabin's Bum Rush Blitz. Did you really think our friend from the Great White North would ever miss such an important skill? As for not mentioning the Bum Rush in the final battle, you got us. Greg Stewart sends his deepest apologies and has been warned that he'll be deported should he miss something so obvious ever again. I'm just going to say it now. I don't remember if this is true, but I'm pretty sure they threatened to deport me every other issue. Another Capcom survival horror game, this time Dino Crisis, which was something, maybe that was the previous. That's right, I think 2 issues ago was the Resident Evil 3 cover, and last issue was Dino Crisis, or vice versa. Anyway, man, we were in love with Capcom. Because yes, Jim Mazurek did a Dino Crisis strategy in one of the previous issues that we did a Let's Read on. God, this game looks so good, though. I know that doesn't look great by today's standards, but by PlayStation 1 standards, man, that T-Rex looks awesome! And of course, it has Resident Evil 3 Nemesis demo. Capcom was amazing back then. And here we are at Tricks. And now, Tricks, we talked about in the previous Let's Reads. There's not a lot new to talk about in Tricks. This was a big part of our magazine, as well as the Tips and Tricks magazine, out of what was the name of the publishing company? Larry Flint Publishing, I think, did Tips and Tricks, who was our main competitor. But again, this is not necessarily pre-internet. If you might have noticed in all the letters there that a lot of those letters came through email, but still, this was a huge Tricks section was big business for us. I mean, that's what people bought these for. And so, yeah, our trick man Terry Minnick, would compile this every month. Although when I was talking to Todd, he pointed out that he believes that us editors had to proofread it, which I'd forgotten about.
I don't want to say I have no journalistic integrity, but my attention to that level of detail, I think I did a good job, but I'm like, that has gone away. Like I would just skim. I would look to make sure like it was a B button and not a, X button or whatever. Vaguely. Yeah. But I would not do a good job at that now. My career has taken me where I would refuse to do that well. I wouldn't refuse to do it.
But yeah, I don't remember if I ever had to do that, but I think Todd makes a good point. Like, it's such a menial task that I'm sure it wasn't done with the greatest of care. Fatal Fury Wild Ambition here from SNK. I do not remember this game at all. At all. Still going with tricks. We're into PlayStation 1. We're still on Nintendo 64. Lots of N64 codes. Dune 2000 with John Rhys Davies, whose name I couldn't remember in a previous read-through and got called out for. John Rhys Davies playing in Dune 2000. Because he was one of those actors that you saw, like, as we were sort of getting into CD-ROM games in general, John Rhys Davies seemed to appear a lot in those games. He was one of those... I want to say like Malcolm McDowell was another one of those actors that just, they were cool with doing it. And Mark Hamill, you just saw them popping up in these different CD-ROM games and multimedia games, which I thought was really cool. I thought it lent a lot of credence to the art form, as it were. More N64 codes. Sunsoft with their big Looney Tunes license that they were really milking at this point. Distributed by Electrosource LLC. I have no idea who that is. I assume they're not around anymore. Oh, I always love these ads. So first of all, more Nintendo 64 codes. Lots of Nintendo 64 codes. Let's see what insulting thing 3DFX has to say this month. Console gaming can really be a lot of fun. So can finger puppets. You might want to give those a whirl too. Okay. That wasn't really that, I guess it's insulting. 3DFX PC accelerators, there's a better way to game. There's a reason why you're not still playing with stuffed animals. There's also a reason why you shouldn't still be playing on a console. Actually, it's the same reason. They both suck. The fact is, when enhanced with a 3DFX Voodoo Graphics Accelerator, the performance and visual effects on your PC will blow your console out of the water. So check out one today and leave the coloring and stuff to the console guys. Yeah, boy, again, it was a bold strategy to go into, this was a console-centric magazine. We didn't cover PC games. Neither did any of the other Ziff Davis publications out of our office. Of course, we had, Computer Gaming World out of the West Coast. But, yeah, bold strategy, Cotton. I don't know if it worked for them, but at least it wasn't as insulting as the extremely sexist one from a couple issues ago. Here we are into some PlayStation codes. Tomb Raider 3. Man, it always kills me how long Rainbow Six has been going. This is a cool ad, though. It's just, man, it made team-based shooting stuff look so neat. Also, a Game Boy Color version, huh? So this is for the N64. Oh, N64 and PlayStation. I'm assuming these are PlayStation shots. Tom Clancy's Rainbow Six. Did we know at the time that was going to be such a big business franchise? More codes. We're on page 36 now. We got Snowcross. Another Vatical. Man, Vatical was really working hard on the Game Boy Color. I wonder if this had voice. Advanced Snowmobile Physics System, incorporating extreme slopes, banked turns, and radical jumps, even full-blown half-pipes. I don't know how you would really come across with that. And I'm really interested. I should try this like in emulation or something, because I would love to see what advanced snowmobile physics look like in the form of a Game Boy Color game. This did have a rumble feature, huh? So I assume it's probably one of those cartridges that had the big battery compartment for AAA battery in the top. Nuclear Strike, I think, and we're still on codes here. Oh, look at that. Hot Wheels Turbo Racing, where you can unlock Kyle Petty's NASCAR Hot Wheels car. That's cool. That's relevant to my interests. Nuclear Strike 64, every time I see this ad, again, a very cool ad, but I'm always sad about the fact, this always reminds me of, the Strike series and Road Rash, where it felt like both of those series sort of went to the N64 to die. I have no idea if this is any good, though. It might be a good game. Also being released by THQ and not Electronic Arts. Electronic Arts has moved on from this, I guess. Because the Strike series was once, I don't know, a pretty big series for them. And of course it was a Genesis-centric series when it started, which is, I think, why I have fond memories of it. More codes for Medal of Honor, which is covered in this issue. I mentioned in a previous read-through that I loved the idea of this ad, that you're looking out from the computer screen with one of those great ergonomic keyboards and one of those high-tech 2-button mice. I absolutely did have this joystick. This was the first joystick I ever bought for my PC. I played Wing Commander 3 with that joystick. I did not know her. But you know you're going to score. Haha, sex joke. Cool idea for an ad, though. What is this? Find the monster on our homepage for a hot deal. That's interesting. I wonder if that was in the previous one. Huh. I wonder what the hot deal was. Either way, very cool ad, I think. Weird ad. Marvel Selects. Start where the story begins. Newly released originals follow the early adventures of Spider-Man and the Fantastic Four and see why they've remained the world's favorites for more than 25 years. I guess these were reprints. Marvel Selects must be reprints of classic issues. It's so interesting living in a world now where Marvel, well, now that it's Disney, but where Marvel is such a big thing, how they just weren't 25 years ago. Not that these characters weren't important, but they weren't the juggernaut there now, especially since Disney bought them. Still on codes, 44 pages in now. Action Ace, the stuff no one else gets. I meant to look up what this is. I think it's a website. Yeah, it's a website. She's the Dragon Lady and she's after you. The secret is yours, young Johnny Ace. Fight, hide, resist, run. She won't stop until she gets the one thing you possess. Access. Access to the hottest place for pop culture entertainment, gossip, auctions, and shopping. All the cool stuff, the games, videos, DVDs, toys, anime, and music from those on the outside. And music that those on the outside wait months to get. The Dragon Lady wants it for her own evil ways. You must be strong, Johnny, and never divulge the password. Neoglyphics. Oh, that's animated episodes. A shop. Auction and trades. Read the latest toy game and movie news and reviews and affiliates. Like, it reads like it's some sort of online game, but I think it's just a website. I should look this up sometime. ActionAce.com. I sincerely doubt they're still around. But it's just such a weird ad. I guess, we get you to go to the website. I don't remember ever seeing this thing. Look, there's another one here. As we're still in codes, now we're into the Game Boy side. The hottest place on the planet for action, entertainment, and pop culture. 90 days free internet service for dropping by. Wow, a free MP3 Ace player and mixer. Don't just play free music, mix! Get the world's only MP3 player and mixer just like the DJs use. Free games, we'll send you a CD loaded with the hottest game demos on the planet. Man, this place sounds awesome. And here we are, Game of the Month, Donkey Kong 64. So yeah, I've got Todd helping me out here a little bit on this one, but I'm just going to read sort of the opening paragraph here. Once you start spilling your energy into the immense worlds of Donkey Kong 64, you'll know that you're in for something special. This game has more personality than JFK, and the cast of Kongs will charm in ways that'll often surprise and amuse you. If you thought Banjo-Kazooie was cool, you ain't seen nothing yet. DK64's 8 worlds are awe-inspiring to say the least, with amazing aesthetics that'll challenge the senses. But most importantly, the game is just a whole lot of fun. As always, with Rare, mini-games, secrets, and extras abound, and the entire quest will take the average gamer more than 50 hours to complete. So get ready to kick it DK style. The Hunt for Golden Bananas by Todd Zuniga. The entire city of Seattle is smaller than the 8 worlds in DK64. That was absolutely something that they said to him on the press junket. Match that with all kinds of minigames and piles upon piles of abject silliness, and you've got two things: a quintet of Kongs and sensory overload. Donkey Kong, one of Nintendo's original heroes, is back, and he's joined by 4 relatives in yet another hunt to overcome King K. Rool and his wicked henchmen. We decided to break up this guide into 2 parts so all the surprises aren't ruined for those of you who absolutely love to hunt the mammoth worlds pieced together by Rare's developers. Just remember, if you're hardcore, you'll get everything in every one of the game's huge worlds, and this guide will be the perfect companion for when you've searched a world inside and out but are still a banana short. Todd's saying the game was 65 hours to complete. Best weapon is the pineapple launcher. Best character is Diddy. Best advice, use Banana Port to save lots of time. Also try Banjo-Kazooie. And yeah. And of course we've got all the different Kongs. Donkey, Diddy, Lanky, Tiny, and Chunky. And then Todd threw in King Kong, the father of Kongs everywhere. This Kong just wasn't cartoony enough to make the cut. You won't find him in this game, but man, that face is funny. It's interesting because, of course, when Donkey Kong originally came out in the arcades, Universal, I believe, sued Nintendo over the licensing rights because they said it was too close to King Kong. So it's kind of funny that that's in there. I don't know that Todd knew that when he added this, but they're intrinsically linked, Donkey Kong and King Kong. Of course, the outcome of that was that Universal, or the courts discovered that Universal didn't own the rights to King Kong. They only said they owned it when it was convenient for them. Weird how that works. World 1 Jungle Japes. So I know, like I said, I'm going to get Todd in here to talk about some of this stuff. So Donkey Kong 64. Man, I do not like this game. I never liked this game. This is such a rare game in that they went overboard on the collectathons. My major memory of this, and you can see here as far as like golden bananas and everything, is you had to play through every level with all 5 Kongs. And you would see bananas that you couldn't collect if you weren't using the right Kong, because they would be a different color and they'd be well, they wouldn't semi-transparent. They were opaque. They were transparent. You could see through them. Yeah, I guess that's semi-transparent. Not the point. Not the important part of this discussion. So it always irritated the hell out of me. And I think that meant you had to backtrack, because I think you only start with Donkey Kong and then you have to rescue. Like you say here, you have to rescue Diddy Kong. One of the first objectives is freeing Diddy Kong, your partner in crime. First, you have to score the coconut shooter, which means finding 3 coins. Then use the green vines hanging next to Funky's shop to swing across. Once you're there, go to the barrel cannon sitting in the middle of the plateau. It'll shoot you right in front of Diddy's prison. From there, you need to locate 3 doorways with coconut targets above them. The hardest one to hit will be seen from the water. The key to this one is going up to Funky's shop and getting to the edge where the vines get to Get to Diddy were. Get the crosshairs up. It's just a very, like I said, rare game. So one of the questions that I had, and also one of the reasons I ended up reaching out to Todd, is because, of course, we have these maps. So I'm always interested, and we'll talk about this a little bit later when we get to the Tomb Raider strategy, but I'm always interested when looking at these old expert gamers where the maps came from, because it seemed like about a 50-50 split where we would get maps supplied to us by the publishers, or we would have to make them ourselves. So yeah, I talked to Todd about this a little bit.
Immediately when I saw them, I thought that Nintendo supplied them. And then, now that we've been talking, I think that might have been part of why Carrie was there, to like draw them.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
that wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah, like, it's so weird. They seem both like Nintendo might have supplied them, and then they also seem like some dude just put them together on a 2000 laptop, you know?
Right.
Yeah, I have to think, based on this, it does reason that he had to draw these maps, which means I had to like play through it over and over. So it might have been that we were there for the better part of our lives. Like, I'm just trying to remember like where we ate or like what I did at night, and I'm just like that. I've just erased it. I don't know. That's hilarious about these maps. I just love the idea that I had to keep playing, and he was just like, "Go left." I haven't drawn that. So I'm looking at one of them. It's like there's like a room. Chunky's blueprint is in there, and there's like a room with little like, looks like that. I can't remember the name of the game. Not Excalibur, but like an Atari 2600 game. And it's good. I mean, Carrie, good on ya. Good on ya.
See, like, this is the type of stuff that I'm talking about as far as the colored bananas. Like, you look at these maps, and there are different colored bananas all over the place. And you say here, note, the colored bananas on the map represent the golden bananas for each individual Kong. So, yeah. There's the key below, the banana key. But this game was a big deal. It was just a big deal, right? World 3, Frantic Factory. I think this is where you finally rescued the final Kong, Chunky. Jack in the Box versus Tiny Kong. But yeah, it was a way to expand the game, which is normal now too, because you want to have as much time as possible with every game. But back then, I just found it a little bit crazy. There's the map to Frantic Factory. Again, all the different types of bananas. Gloomy Galleon. This feels like a throwback because especially I think the second game for the Super Nintendo was pretty pirate themed, I want to say. Well, King K. No, I guess he's a pirate. I don't know enough about it. Caution, spoiler, Rareware coin. Remember when Cranky told you to bring him 15 banana medals? Well, this special surprise may not have been what you thought. You'll have a chance to play Jetpack, a classic Rare creation that they managed to fit on the cart by using a powerful new compression agent. That's interesting. If you manage to blast away and get 5,000 points, it's not easy. You'll be rewarded with the Rareware coin. That's pretty cool. So that was something that I think a lot of us, especially in North America, our experience with Rare for the most part, unless we were Commodore 64 people, was their output on Nintendo, on the NES. So, I don't think a lot of us, I didn't know anything about their home computer and microcomputer background. So, it's cool that even at this point, they're starting to sort of dig into their back catalog, and that Nintendo is cool with that, and throwing in something like Jetpack, which was one of their earlier hits. I mean, they're really well known for it. And of course, nowadays, I think you can play it on a lot of the different downloadable services. I think it's been reworked as a mobile game. But yeah, I didn't even know that existed. That was really neat. Huh. Again, the Gloomy Galleon Golden Bananas. Top Gear Rally 2 for the N64. This was another series that I felt was super popular on the 16-bit systems. I believe I put footage of this in one of the previous Let's Reads. It's okay. It was an okay game. I kind of liked it. Kind of. Again, an Electrosource LLC distribution. More Donkey Kong 64 maps. Like Todd was saying, I'm pretty sure that I would be surprised if Carrie and Todd didn't have to go up to Redmond to do this, and if Carrie didn't actually just build these maps by hand. They don't look like something that Nintendo would have supplied, but who knows? Maybe they did, but they really do look like something that one of our art directors would have put together for us, which was a lot of work. And again, I'll get into that a little bit when we get into the Tomb Raider side of things, but here we go. This is the end of the first half of Donkey Kong 64. More to come in XG number 68. Next month, we'll finish off DK64 with the last 4 monster-sized worlds and whatever other secrets there are to uncover. Fungi Forest, Crystal Caves, Creepy Castle, and DK Island all await. So be sure to check back next issue when we put the finishing touches on this Kong-sized quest. In the meantime, we've got a Gex 3 Game Boy. Man, I did not remember how many Game Boy Color ads there were in this magazine. I mean, every other ad has been for a Game Boy Color game. That's wild. IDOS tried so hard to make Gex a thing. I almost feel bad for them. Gex was okay, but it never ever sort of got, never hit critical mass. Vandal Hearts 2. So, let me just see here. So we've got what? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 pages for Vandal Hearts 2, which would probably seem like a lot, but Vandal Hearts 2 is a big game. And so it was one of those things where, and I talked to Todd about this a little bit too, and we were reminiscing that, one of the hardest parts about doing this job was having a very strict page count. And sometimes, like me previously when having to do Grandia, where it wasn't the cover game, so I didn't have the most pages out of any game in the magazine. and just stuffing something that was like an 80-hour RPG into like 8 pages, which leads to, I think, layouts like this. Nothing wrong with this layout, but this is very dense. There's a lot of information here because there was really no other way to do it. So anyway, this was by Jim Mazurik, who I would still say was probably the best strategy writer we had on the staff. So let's see what his intro says. Simply fantastic. Don't be fooled by the somewhat outdated graphical style. Instead, think back to the days of plush, vivid, hand-drawn graphics where every RPG looked and felt somewhat like a fantasy-based coloring book. It's a time where gameplay took priority over graphical appeal, and people bought games because they were fun to play, not just cool to look at. The music would set the pace, and the game would flow seamlessly from event to event. Vandal Hearts 2 is just like one of those classic games of yesteryear, and it's a joy to see that Konami took the time to do it right. If you've been following these Let's Reads, you probably would have noticed that it's a bit of a theme with Jim, that Jim was very much gameplay over graphics, and a little bit, I think, curmudgeonly like we all are, even though he was in his early 20s at the time, about how, gameplay is king, and graphics should take a back seat. So he there's always that theme in his intros. He says this game is like a 60-hour game. The challenge is quite hard. Best advice, take a week off from work. So I loved the first Vandal Hearts. I actually played through it on my Twitch channel in the last, couple of years. It's all a blur. COVID's made everything a blur. I never ever played Vandal Hearts 2. I own it. I've never gotten around to playing it. But I do remember watching Jim play it and sitting and watching him play it because I was such a big fan of the first game. And I remember the big difference in this game was that it's a turn-based strategy RPG, but unlike any of them I'd ever played, and I don't think Final Fantasy Tactics did this, but I could be wrong because I don't have strong memories of that game. But the first Vandal Hearts and the Shining Force games is sort of what my frame of reference was that when you move, one of your counterparts on the enemy team would move at the same time. So you kind of had to, I think, anticipate what their moves were going to be, and it would all play out in real time as opposed to, you move all your characters and then they move all their characters. So, it's not much different in that you still had to anticipate what they were going to do, but you saw it play out in a more granular fashion, which I thought was interesting. We got some real small text here. Some of the maps are quite large. Sometimes it's just plain difficult to grab all the available items. I'm not going to read through all this. The two different types of skills, active and passive. There are two types of skills in Vandal Hearts 2, skills that you actively use and skills that are always in effect when they are equipped. Both are useful, although we tend to like the passive skills more than the active ones. Try to read the descriptions of as many skills as you can for each weapon type and learn the ones that you find most helpful. Believe us, not all the skills are all that great. We've found many that rarely work, and if they do, their effects just aren't all that special. Be picky, and you'll be much more confident during long and excruciating battles. So yeah, this game was, from everything I remember, it was a grind. And you can see Jim is just packing in as much as he can here. Like, these are each battles. So, over 2 pages, we've got, 15? Yeah, 16 battles. Oh, wow. These are each 2 battles apiece. So, I can't imagine. Jim was great at, just... Because this isn't the only game he covered this month. So, he was great at just stuffing tons of gameplay and content and doing good guides in, a 3 or 4 week cycle. He was just too good at it. It wasn't surprising when the magazine became Game Now, he left to go do strategy guides. Because that's what he was good at. And I think it was his passion. 32 battles over the space of these couple pages. Looking for anything that kind of pops out here. But again, this is a very utilitarian strategy guide, right? Because there's not enough space. This would be a couple 100-page book probably, or at least over 150 pages. And he's doing it in 10 pages. Although it is only the first half. That's the other thing about that. I always loved the Vandal Hearts art too. We're still going here into battle. Oh, I don't know. We're into the next set of battles here, I guess. We talked about Boombots last time. This was from the Neverhood. Not a great game, but I always loved the Neverhood art style. Of course, same artist who did Earthworm Jim. But again, not a great game. It was mostly a one-on-one fighting game, I think. And it just didn't do it for me. Although there you've got the character from Skull Monkeys and the Neverhood game, which I always loved. I always thought he was a cool character. And we finally made it to the dreaded weapon and item list, which is the end of the first part of the strategy, I believe. You could go to GameExpo.com and get a free Pokemon card with every online trade or purchase. Hey, we got Pokemon in. No, it's just an ad. That didn't count. This is, of course, a Wizards of the Coast thing. Game Expo, the place to trade, buy, and talk about games. And yeah, so Vandal Hearts 2, I don't know where I saw that, but I'm pretty sure this is still just part 1. So this was the second game of 2 so far this issue that we were spreading over 2 issues of Expert Gamer. And here we are, Sega Rally 2. I was so excited that I got to do this. So of course, I had played Sega Rally 2. I had imported a Dreamcast. I had imported Sega Rally 2. I actually have it sitting in the room behind me. I feel like I probably should have got it out. So I was very familiar with the game when it came time to do the strategy because it was like the Dreamcast game that I bought. I was super excited about it. So when John assigned Sega Rally 2 to me, I was super stoked to do it. And again, not that I didn't have to do a lot of gameplay because there were some changes between the Japanese and American versions, which I do get into later on. But I was just super stoked to be able to do this at all. So let's read the intro. Very long, easy write. And hey, look, I have my zd.com email address now. It doesn't work anymore. The Saturn's failure in the US means that a lot of people never got the chance to experience the original Sega Rally, one of the best home racers ever. If you're one of those poor folks who missed out back in 1995, here's a second chance. Dreamcast owners everywhere are about to experience the white-knuckled racing action of one of the best titles ever released in the genre. Sega Rally 2 caters to just about every driving style imaginable. The track settings on the following pages will get budding rally rookies breaking records in no time, while also providing a great basis for further tweaking. The learning curve may be a little bit overwhelming at first, but stick with it, and you'll be rewarded with one of the most satisfying racing experiences ever to grace a home console. I think I said that twice. About 20 hours long, moderate challenge, best car, the Corolla, useless car, Peugeot Maxi, most wanted car, the 89 Cavalier. That was what I drove at the time. My 1989 Cavalier was the first car that actually was the second car I owned. First car I owned alone. The first car that I ever owned was a Oldsmobile Cutlass Cruiser station wagon. It was my dad's that he signed over to my brother and I, and my brother wrecked it the first night we owned it. Sorely lacking network play with a frowny emoji. Also try V-Rally 2, System Dreamcast, publisher, developer, Sega. So Sega Rally 2, when it came to Dreamcast, wasn't just a port of the arcade game, although there was an arcade mode. So much like Sega had been doing with racing games, and I've covered games like Super Hang-On and Super Monaco GP at length for the Genesis, they would add championship modes or world tours or something like that to their arcade racing ports. And Sega Rally 2 was no different. Actually, Sega Rally on the Saturn, I think, they didn't do anything like that. But with Sega Rally 2, they did. So this was a challenge for me because I wasn't 100% sure the best way to approach this. But we decided to go through the 10-year championship mode and just give people advice. So one of the things that I call out before you take that green flag, finish arcade mode. Yeah, we know this is a guide to the 10-year championship, but first set the game difficulty to easy and take a run through the arcade mode. Not only is it good practice, it also nets you the Fiat Seicento Sporting. This goofy-looking car is easily the best front-wheel drive vehicle you'll get before unlocking the Renault Maxi Megane in Year 5. Remember, you don't need to win to get the car, just finish. Which is why I said to set it to easy. Not because we're not hardcore gamers, but because it would be faster that way. Understand your car. The best settings for each track have been provided in the following pages. To really get every possible ounce of speed from your machine, however, you should understand exactly what kind of effect each setting has on your car. With this in mind, be sure to check out the settings guide below. Take that knowledge and mess around with the cars a bit in time trial mode to really become a Sega Rally 2 master. So yeah, that was the key thing. So you had a bunch of different cars, four-wheel drive, front wheel, mid-rear, front rear, so rear drive with a front engine, and then RR, which was engine in the rear and drive in the rear. I don't know why I said that. It's right there. 4-wheel, front engine, front wheel, mid-engine, rear wheel, front engine, rear wheel, and rear engine, rear wheel. And then also you had all these different settings for the transmission, gear ratio, front and rear suspension, steering, and brakes. And so that's what I decided to do, was to basically tell people, here's the car I think you should use, here are the settings I think you should use for these different types of cars, and some tips on the different tracks. So these maps, I believe, are directly out of the game. So when you fire up the game and you go to a track, you'll get these little 3D maps. So what we did was we took screenshots of the maps, and then one of the art directors would, actually the courses might have been laid out. This red, actually, you know what they were? These red outlines for the courses were also there on the map screen, and they did that because there were some maps that had, multiple pieces to the courses. And then we just added in these little notations for advice. So like for year one here, there's 4 races. Here's XG's choice. This is the car that I think you should use. And then the outline of each race, suggested tires, the type of car you're driving, and the settings that I suggest. I hate the leading on these. They don't look very good. But either way, the settings I suggest, some random screenshots to try to make it look a little nice, and then just little bits of advice like hug the inside wall on this turn to prepare for the upcoming bridge. This is a sneaky turn. Tap the brake just as you enter. You'll nail the outside wall and lose speed. And then watch the pylons on the left side of this turn. As soon as you pass the final one, the turn tightens up. Let off the gas, feather the brake to stay in control. And so, yeah, just go through each one of them. Even when courses repeated, I think the weather would change as well, and the time of day and temperature. So they actually did need different settings for each course, which I thought was super cool about this game. I really should go back and play this game. Subaru Impreza 555. But yeah, so all 10 years were like this. The Mitsubishi Evolution 4, I think that was one of my favorite cars at the time. But you'll see that like the Impreza WRC was my choice for this one as well. It was just a really good all-arounder car. Classic Celica. That was that the car that was in? Yeah, I think Celica was in the first Sega Rally. There's the Mitsubishi Evolution. Unlock the Evolution 3. Again, we're using the Impreza. One of the things you might notice from some of these screenshots too is it was hard to get good screenshots of the Dreamcast sometime. So some of these screenshots look awful. You'll see here that I didn't always, like, some of these are pretty straightforward. Not much new to say here because we've already covered this track. The run is almost exactly the same as the desert course in year 4. Set your car up for high speed. Watch the puddles. They're all in the same position they were the last time you raced this track. So there was some repetition. But in general, I was really happy with the layout because it was flexible enough that it could be a little bit different, but it was also giving you a lot of information that you needed to get through the game, and I really loved that. I also love the mud effects on the side of the car. Look at how cool that looks for 1999 anyway. Yeah, year 7. Year 8. And of course, year 9, the Renault Alpine A110. Alpine, I should say. A110. I loved the Lancia HF Integral. Also, the game from the first, or the car from one of the cars from the first Sega Rally. And the final year, Corolla WRC, and you unlock the Lancia 037 Rally, which is just a damn cool looking car. Plus, I love the Martini delivery. So then, after year 10, you get to the Super SS, which I thought was really cool. So with this track, I believe there are 2 cars on the course, but you start in different places. But you both run a full lap, or 2 laps on it. So in order to earn the final car, you'll have to beat it in a 1-on-1 race on this secret course. You'll start a half lap away from each other, and you have 2 laps to take the lead and finish in first. Learn to fear the term long, medium, left, Titans. When you hear that dreaded phrase, slow down. Otherwise, the only real challenge on this course is the 2 hairpins. There's one halfway through the lap and one just before you cross the finish line. Use the handbrake on the front-wheel drive cars to kick the rear end into position. Our best times came using the Lancia Stratos, but overall, the Corolla is the better choice. So then I had some space left. So, again, I was pretty familiar with the Japanese version of the game, and because of doing the strategy, I've become very familiar with the American version of the game. So let's just read what we had here. Sega Rally 2, Japan versus the USA. So in the Japanese version of Sega Rally 2, released back in January 1999, was a little bit different from our US version. First and foremost, it features a network multiplayer mode for up to 4 players over a closed network in Japan. This feature rocked, and it's really quite sad that SOA still doesn't have a proper network in place for the DC in the US. As a result, no network play for us. That sucks. Oddly, the game featured 2 cars which were removed from the US version. The Ford Escort WRC, which is right there, and the Peugeot 106 Maxi were both dropped in favor of different cars. Also, the Lancer Evolution 5 had a different paint job. Not a huge deal, but it's noticeable. Oh yeah, they are different. Look at that. That's pretty good editing. The difficulty level was a tad lower in the Japanese release too. We had a much easier time blowing through the 10-year championship mode back then. US version. The trip across the pond brought a few changes to Sega Rally 2. For us lucky gaijin, that's foreigner in Japanese, I guarantee John Riccardi added that. The most obvious of these changes is the addition of 2 new cars that replaced the 2 that were taken out. The Fiat Seicento Sporting and the Peugeot 206 WRC, which is right here. The Peugeot 206 is actually the default car, the very first one you'll see when you go to the car selection screen. You'll earn the Fiat Seicento, I hope I'm saying that right, by finishing arcade mode. Oddly enough, there's no car profile available for the feisty little Fiat in the car profiles mode. Can you say rush job? The Lancer Evolution 5 has been changed to just Lancer Evolution with no V5 and sports a slightly modified new paint job. Finally, a much appreciated, though not quite perfect, vibration function has been added for the American release using the jump pack. Is that what they called it? Anyway, my first racing strategy. I didn't get to do a lot of them. In fact, I think the next issue might be Gran Turismo 2, and I didn't get to do that, although I did help Jim with it. I remember John apologizing to me for some reason for not letting me do it, but, I mean, I was the new guy, and that was one of Sony's flagship games, so it made sense that I wasn't doing it. But yeah, racing strategy. Love it. Medal of Honor. Another strategy by Andrew Barron. So he had already done... Or had he done anything yet? I think this is the first one we're looking at that he's done for this issue. Put a helmet on that soldier. DreamWorks has done an amazing job recreating the World War II combat experience with Medal of Honor. This game is much more than your average Doom clone. In fact, it could be said that Medal of Honor is the PlayStation equivalent of GoldenEye 007. There are a total of 7 missions with 3 to 4 levels in each. During the course of each mission, you will have sets of objectives to complete. At the end of each level, your performance will be graded. What makes Medal of Honor special is how realistic it feels. From the ambient sounds to the way the enemies react to you, it's easy to let reality slip away. It's that good. I could drone on for hours at how amazing this game is, but I think I'll stop now. This guide will take you from start to finish, while also providing tested tactics. Good luck. 25 to 30 hours. Best weapon, silenced pistol. Hardest mission, mission 6. Don't forget to reload. Also try GoldenEye. So, Medal of Honor was, I think, a landmark release. It was a DreamWorks game, which was, of course, Spielberg was involved in that. We were on the heels of Saving Private Ryan, which also kind of begat Band of Brothers. I think Band of Brothers was around this time. So there was sort of a real World War II, media renaissance. So it was great to be able to play a World War II game, but this game was so good, and they treated the subject matter so well. I've gone back and played it, and there'll be some footage here that'll probably run, but it was very cinematic. Like, it was one of the first DreamWorks games. It had an amazing soundtrack. Who I don't remember who composed it, but it just the whole ambiance and atmosphere was amazing in Medal of Honor. And of course, what it turned into was sort of overload of World War II shooters, although I really enjoyed them personally. But, Medal of Honor, there was also then Call of Duty came along. Then we just had a ton of World War II stuff. And then, of course, now we've gotten to the point where you almost never get World War II games anymore, which is too bad. But yeah, anyway, loved it. These maps look like they might have been supplied because there's a lot of texture on the ground here. So I'm not sure. But yeah, these maps look like they might have been supplied. I would love to see... I think Medal of Honor is a game that, as I'm recording this, one of the games I'm playing right now is a Dead Space remake. I would love to see this game remade for modern consoles. It's been so long now. I mean, it's been 24 years. That I think... But it's a timeless game that I think it will be great to be able to play this game with modern graphics and with modern controls, because of course this was pre-DualShock, so this is a D-pad only game. But man, it's one of my favorites. I just love it. Destroy the mighty railgun Greta. So I think you're basically a paratrooper in this game. So you're never fighting with a group. And actually, I remember on the PlayStation 2 and Xbox, I can't remember if it's Call of Duty or Medal of Honor. I think it was Call of Duty at that point, where they had the opening level was storming the beach at Normandy. And, there you're actually fighting alongside a lot of people. In this game, you didn't fight alongside a lot of people. A lot of the levels were in the dark. You're sneaking around a lot. You're a lone soldier for most of it. But still such a great game. And Andy's just doing the map thing and going through all this. So I'm not going to try to say any of these German words. Killing a lot of Nazis in this game. Heard the word Achtung a lot. You got a lot of space for this. Escape the V2 rocket plant. Achtung! So there's some general strategies here. Long distance, that's the way I played this game. You're shooting at people from a long way away for a lot of the time. There was a couple notes I had for this page. Yeah, it also, I think, it even had locational damage on the bodies too, so. Andy's got that all broken down here, like hitting them in the helmet, 100% damage when you knock the helmet off, I assume. Headshot was almost certainly an instant kill. Arms, body, groin, 50% chance of killing them, hitting them in the groin. Shooting the limbs or groin of a soldier will often give them pause. This is useful when a grenade is nearby. Let's read this Achtung call out. Earning a better rating. In order to earn the 3 stars and hence the excellent rating, you will need to complete the level with 75% of health plus of health. Kill all the Nazis. This includes those triggered by performing certain actions, i.e. turning on the alarms or killing posted guards. Learn what triggers them. A decent hit ratio of 70% plus. Perform well enough in the levels and you'll earn the medals. They are just used for boasting, nothing real useful. Secret codes. By earning excellent ratings, you can earn bonuses. These may be additional characters in multiplayer mode or new cheats. Not all of the cheats are earned this way, however. There are a few that you cannot earn. Keep an eye on XG for more in the future. Captain Die. Input this before you begin a game. With it, you won't refill energy between levels. It's named after a certain military consultant who's tougher than a can of nails. If you complete the game with this code, it'll open the way to more secrets. So that, of course, is a reference to Dale Die, who you might not know his name, but I guarantee if you've watched any movie that had anything to do with the military, with soldiers in any way, especially in the 90s and the early 2000s, you know what he looks like. You've seen him. He was in, he's been in everything. He was in Saving Private Ryan. He was in everything. I think he's still alive. Like Andy said here, a military consultant, one of the people that Hollywood would use whenever they were doing movies that had to do with the armed forces, the American armed forces. But yeah, you've seen him all over the place. Dennis mode activates the nifty multiplayer power-ups. Cheat on the menu. Sprechen. This unlocks the American movie mode on the cheat menu. I'd like to know what that means. Finest hour. Type this in and open up Winston Churchill in the multiplayer mode. Big fat man. Type this in to open up Colonel Muller in multiplayer. Winston Churchill, playable in multiplayer, which over here you'll see is multiplayer mode. So yeah, the game has some multiplayer maps. I think there's 6 or 7 of them here. Castle Von Trapped. So, as I was just saying that they treated the source material with a lot of respect, obviously they were having some fun here too. But yeah, like some of these characters are a little ridiculous. There's Bismarck. He looks... I'm not sure what's going on with him. He almost looks like a bat. Panzerknacker is kind of weird looking. Where's Winston? There's Wolfgang. There's Winston. Winston Churchill, playable character. Steven is a velociraptor for some reason. Anyway, yeah. A little bit weird. EB Holiday Gift Guide. You always saw these in the magazines around this time. It's basically just a mini catalog for all the games coming out and systems and stuff. Look at that. The PlayStation DualShock. Crash Team Racing. PlayStation Underground subscription kit. How many of you had PlayStation Underground? It was a big deal. Look at that. Gran Turismo 2 for $40. Look at these low prices. Castlevania Special Edition. I do not believe that's what it ended up being called. Rainbow Six. Killer Loop. We're still going. NBA Showtime Test Drive 6 I remember playing a lot of. There's Turok Rage Wars, which is covered later in this magazine. Chef's Love Shack. The Resident Evil games. Fox Sports, another sports label. There were tons of sports labels at the time. That doesn't happen so much anymore. Fighting Force 2, sequel to the game that was supposed to be a Streets of Rage game at one point. Chocobo's Dungeon, Chocobo Racing. There's Medal of Honor. Lego Rock Raiders, back before every Lego game was exactly the same. Tail Concerto, I think I used to have that. Thousand Arms I definitely used to have. There's 3D Pong. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater, beginning to take over the world. Oh man, MTV Music Generator. I hadn't thought about that in a long time. Man, this is still going. Strategy guides. Look at that. Medal of Honor Official Strategy Guide. Why would you need that? You just got a great strategy guide 4 pages earlier. Warpath, Jurassic Park. I don't remember that one. You also don't need this because you're about to get a strategy guide in a minute. Don't need this because Expert Gamer covered it last issue. Don't need this because Expert Gamer just, covered the first half of it. Roadsters. I think I played that for one of the previous read-throughs as well. Still going. Oh man, look at this hardware. This is great. I always wanted one of these. Dream Station. Played with one of those. Wasn't great. Had one of these. These were common in the office. Everybody had the Wormlight. The Wormlight was pretty well loved at the Ziff Davis office. And finally, we're at the back. We're at Dreamcast. And that's the end of the little mini catalog. And then we start Tomb Raider: The Last Revelation. Yeah, I think that Castlevania Special Edition was just Legacy of Darkness. So I was pretty excited to do a Tomb Raider game as well. Not because I was super excited about The Last Revelation. Like I said when we were talking about the cover here a minute ago, Tomb Raider was getting long in the tooth. They gotten to the point where they were doing one game every year, and the shine had really come off the series. You could tell they didn't have the time to create great levels and puzzles anymore. And Last Revelation I felt was kind of the nail in the coffin, although they did do Angel of Darkness on the PlayStation 2, and it was a disaster. And then they gave her a rest and did a reboot. But I was excited to do a strategy for Tomb Raider just because I wanted to do it. It was again one of my favorite series, and I was hyped to be able to get to play a new Tomb Raider game. So let's read the intro. Move over, Dr. Jones. Lara's back. And I apologize for this. This is a good example of, if you listen to the conversation, I'll post the conversation that Todd and I had as its own thing for patrons, for $5 patrons, in the weekly commute upcoming. But Todd and I talk about this a little bit, where when we go back and read stuff that we wrote 25 years ago, and how we are not the same people that we were then. But anyway, this is the intro. The buxom babe from Britain is back. It's good alliteration. In the latest installment of the immensely popular Tomb Raider series, toting more firepower and attitude than ever before, Tomb Raider: The Last Revelation promises to be the best adventure yet. Thankfully, this installment is a return to Lara's roots. You know, back when she really was a Tomb Raider. Although arcade sequences occasionally find their way into the mix, the lion's share of the game is centered on the exploration of Egyptian tombs. Another feature of Lara's newest adventure is the chance to catch a glimpse into her childhood, specifically her training with mentor Werner von Croy. Wow, it's amazing how the past can come back to haunt you. That's a reference to the story in the game. Now, if only we could teach Zuniga how to pronounce Lara, all would be right with the world. Todd Zuniga used to call her Laura. Laura. Always. Drove me nuts. Some survival tips, health packs, weapons and flares, yada, yada, yada. Did you know? Okay, sure, you know Lara has a backflip, standing jump, forward jump, and running jump, but did you know that Lara can also edge forward when she jumps straight up? That's right, if you need to reach something that's just a little bit awkward, like a hanging rope or an oddly placed ledge, it's easy to grab it with this technique. Jump straight up, then quickly press forward. Lara will move a couple inches each time without actually doing a full-fledged forward jump. Very useful. It is very useful. I was proud of that one. Save early, save often. I have a friend who knows who I'm talking about, who needs to take this advice. The never-ending quest to find the perfect save management system in Tomb Raider takes yet another turn with The Last Revelation. Like Tomb Raider 2, this episode of the series allows users to save anywhere at any time. The only caveat, however, is that you're limited to 5 save games per memory card. The traps in Tomb Raider TLR are largely designed to kill Lara at least once before the player can really figure out how to avoid such an untimely demise. Learn to save often, as there's nothing more frustrating than dying only to discover 3 or 4 hours worth of playtime has been lost in the void. Or you could just own multiple memory cards, as most of us did. Boy, that's a throwback to the old days, isn't it? So, Tomb Raider Chronicles. The Last Revelation. So, this actually starts when Lara is a child. And, wow, that's the most voluptuous 16-year-old we've ever laid eyes on. Whew. That's a little rough. And so the opening level is actually her exploring a tomb with Werner von Croy, who is her mentor, and who he actually ends up dying at the end of the level. One of the things that I found interesting is that the game actually, you choose, and I forget why you choose this, but yeah, so there's a section in the beginning where you're actually like doing a race, just against Werner himself, and there are 2 paths you can take. So level 2, you can take the heretical race for the Iris. So this is where you win at whatever cost. So now it's on. Von Croy shreds the mantle of mentor and becomes Lara's competition. He may be old, but he's fast and cagey. Not only will he challenge Lara to a race, but he'll also close gates and collapse bridges behind him to keep his student at a disadvantage. The key to beating the aged archaeologist, good alliteration again, is to stay near him at all times. That way, Lara will overtake him while he's busy detonating all of those traps. Oh, and leave it to the blokes at core to signify the best route in the game with the name Path of the Heretical. Do well here because the outcome of the race directly affects the ending of the game. Lost time can mean the difference between satisfaction and disappointment. So it is a payoff. I don't remember what the payoff was. Level 2, Virtuous Race for the Iris. Is Lara really virtuous? Better hope not. Why? Because the virtuous version of the Iris race is a tad harder to win. We guess Heresy might have its good points after all. If Lara missed any golden skulls, this is where she'll end up. Oh, okay, so these hidden golden skulls denote which level 2 you tackle. There are a few more dastardly traps to work around in this alternate race, particularly a couple of jumps that will put a world of hurt on the young Lara should she miss them. Von Croy also seems faster in the virtuous race for the Iris. No matter how fast the future famous archaeologist goes, her old mentor always seems to be a few steps ahead of her. So that was kind of neat. I always thought that was a cool opening to the game. On to level 3, you're back to adult Lara. The model is a little bit better this time around. But here's what... So there's a story. So this is why I've been talking about maps so much leading up to this, is that I created these maps using graph paper. So all of the maps that you see in this strategy, I created because the Tomb Raider games were grid-based games. Lara would move, like, they were, every hallway was made up of very distinct blocks on the floor and in the walls. So it was pretty easy it was tedious, but it was easy to have some graph paper at my desk, and I would take a step and I would draw out the graph, and I would take another step and I would draw out that piece, and that's how I made these maps. So yeah, so that was how I started it. So I started with that, and I would mark off sort of where all the pickups were, as well as the references I'm making over here. You can see are listed here. And I mean, I don't know what the A's, B's, and C's are. They must be referenced in here. So I just have the map, and then I, sort of call out particular points where you had to pick up items, or you didn't want to miss something, or strategy for that area. So then after I'd made that, and I think I colored them a little bit just to make sure they matched the color scheme from the actual level. Then what I did is I took them to the art director who did this strategy, which was Tim Davis, who drove a Mitsubishi Eclipse, by the way. I remember that. He had a great car. The same car that was in the Fast and the Furious. But it wasn't green, it was black. Anyway, so I took it over to Tim Davis, and we decided that what we wanted to do was make it look like Lara had made these maps. So we wanted to make them look a little hand-drawn. We wanted to make them look, interesting. So he went over my maps, made the tracing even more uneven. If you look closely, you can see they look like they've been colored a little bit quickly, because there's areas where, there's no color. There's just white bleeding through. And then he put it on this texture of crumpled paper. I don't know if the camera's picking this up, but the paper looks like it's been crumpled. And then he created all these little icons. Now, obviously, those icons don't look handmade, but we also wanted the maps to be useful. So one of the things that we decided, too, is that to make them look a little more handmade, we wanted the areas of interest to be handwritten. My penmanship is terrible. I can read it, but I remember saying to Tim, no one's going to be able to read this if I print it. If I print it or write it, it's going to come out one of two ways. It's either going to be illegible, or it's going to look like I'm being super careful with it. So it's like, well, we're early 20-something guys. We want to make it look like a girl created these maps. So we decided to go ask the copy editor, Jen Whitesides, who's a lovely lady. She put up with a lot with all of us idiots that she worked with, to do all the writing. So I would write out what needed to be on each map, and then she would put it in her handwriting. And I think it looks great. I think it really sets the right tone. However, the thing we decided to do, I'm going to say this was Tim or my idea. I don't think that Jen offered this up. She might have, but even if she did, we said yes, is you'll notice there are hearts everywhere, because that's girly, right? So there's like a heart and the exclamation point, and the dot for the eye is a heart, and that's everywhere. And I was super proud of that at the time, but looking back at it now, oh my God, that does not fit this character in the least. Lara is not, maybe she was, I don't know, but it just didn't seem like it was very in character for Lara Croft. Anyway, I was really proud of these maps. I think they turned out great. It was a lot of work. So again, this was the second game I was doing this month along with Sega Rally. I think the reason why I was able to spend more time on this is a much bigger game anyway, but I was able to spend the time and do something like this, which again, I'm super proud of, is because Sega Rally 2, I had already played through the Japanese version anyway. And I had it in my head how I wanted to do it. It was easy to do the maps because we literally were just taking screenshots. So, I already knew what I was doing in that game. So I was able to tear through it really quick and spend more time on Tomb Raider. But yeah, level 8, Temple of Karnak. There's a lot of games in this issue. And we're getting close to the end. I think it's only like 140 pages long, and we're at page 117 now. And actually, this is let me see here. I want to say that this is the first game I've ever worked on in the magazine, on my third issue, that I'd never previously played before. So this was really a trial by fire for me, because I didn't have previous experience with the game I was playing at the time. I just noticed that in my notes over here that I kind of missed out while I was talking about the maps. The other thing is that I think I played, I must have played every level 2 or 3 times, because not only was I going through and drawing the maps, but I was going through and taking the screenshots. So as I was drawing the maps, I was planning out what the bullet points were going to be, and I had to take the screenshots each time. And the way that worked was that we were using Max. I forget the name of the software, but we were piping the signal in to our TV, and then I think we were piping it into the computer first and then out to our televisions. We all had little Trinitrons on our desks. And then there was just like a hotkey for the screenshot software that you just tap anytime you wanted a screenshot. But for the most part, if you wanted to be decent, you had to frame it, you had to stop, you had to make sure it was, exactly what you wanted, and then take the shot. The Great Apostle Hall. Again, we're back in the Temple of Karnak. Crocodiles with a heart. But yeah, I remember really, really enjoying doing this game. Again, it was a real challenge, but I was super happy with the way it turned out. And again, for the third time this issue, more to come. This game is freaking huge. Sorry we couldn't take you further along, but we've only got so many pages to work with, Check back for more next month when our last Revelation coverage continues. I want to say we probably did actually finish getting through the game and making all the maps. And it was just a matter of not having the space that we needed. We would have been assigned a certain amount of pages, and we would have realized after playing the game that we were going to need more. Because again, this was a game that we didn't have experience with, so we didn't know how long it was going to be. Whereas something like Sega Rally, we knew 10-year championship, 12 pages would be more than enough to cover it. Hey look, Electronic Gaming Monthly, I know that magazine. A little bit of ESRB rating system over here. I always loved that they did this. I always loved that it was something that... So what this means, Ziff Davis is a softbound company, and then you see all our magazine branding. That is because, as far as I know, this was a public service. This page was considered a public service. While I don't know that we wrote the copy, I think it was supplied by the ESRB. As far as I know, the ESRB did not pay for this. It was considered a public service by the magazine, which is why all our branding is on the bottom of it. WrestleMania 2000. Again, I talked to Todd a little bit about this, but this is another game that Todd did. Let's read his intro. How one of the most ridiculous, over-the-top sports has managed to captivate public interest for so long is beyond me. Rehearsed and exciting, scintillating and scripted, pro wrestling has stolen the affections of almost every age group. A constant and surreal storyline leaves us wondering if we are watching a sport or merely a primetime soap opera with gorilla-sized men who are more than happy to use metal chairs and bats as a way to shock and delight fans. Wrestling's success has earned itself a seemingly permanent spot in the video game world, and THQ's WrestleMania 2000 is one of the best digital brawlers to date. It captures the intensity and the anything-can-happen mentality of the WWF, now the WWE, and the gameplay is fresh and quick. I leave you with some tips, some tricks, and some moves. So, the first thing I'm struck by is, look at little baby Rock. Look at him! Look at the sideburns right down to his chin. No tattoos, nothing. WWF was of course right in the middle of the Attitude Era, and this was during The Rock's biggest run. But yeah, all this really is a move list, and I talked to Todd a little bit about this one too. So I'll just roll that.
Part of me is like, I mean, now all this stuff is, you can go to a pause menu or it'll just show up on the screen. But I wondered, is like, did they not have this stuff, or was it just that you'd have to pause to make sure? So it would be nice if you're playing with, and I quote, Mr. Ass, that you have just all the moves there. So it's like, oh, now I can just I can just glance over and then I can keep doing those. Like, that makes sense to me. But it's just funny to see it in this layout, because it's just like every wrestler has a little half page, or fifth of a page column, half page by a fifth of a page, and it's just like there's so many people, and it's just like that was just me going through and making sure that they did the thing that they did. Like, what a absurd use of my time. But I would imagine, THQ is probably like, here's the move list.
And I kind of love that Mankind, Cactus Jack, and Dude Love are all listed in one little box here. Also, Jerry the King Lawler and Jim Ross are playable characters. The McMahons, Deborah and Terry Runnels, Paul Bearer, Stephanie McMahon. It's kind of, I always find it kind of a little depressing, because I was super into wrestling when I was a kid. I was of the Hulk Hogan era. Saturday Morning Supercade? I think it was Superstars of Wrestling. And like the early WrestleMania years, like I was the right age for that, when they were all heroes or villains, and they were all like Supermen, basically. And then I kind of fell out of love with wrestling, and then I got back into it in the late 90s, just because my roommates at the time, I don't think any of us, we were all like lapsed fans, so we all got back into it and we watched it together as roommates, and that was the Attitude Era. But I always find now it's a little bit depressing to look at any wrestling coverage from the late 90s, because so many of them are dead now at very young ages. But anyway, WrestleMania 2000. Yet another game. I mean, we're getting close to the end of the magazine. There's like 12 pages left in the magazine, and we're stuffing yet another game in here. This is, of course, Twisted Metal 4. Andrew Barron did this. This installment of the Twisted Metal series brings back all the mayhem and action of the original TM games. 989 Studios has worked hard to give back what many thought was missing from the last game. Although the gameplay is comparable to Twisted Metal 3, there are more weapons to deal with and a greater degree of detail and interaction with the levels. Each level, for example, has tons of secret destructible passages and ends with a battle against a boss. The game's AI is fairly intelligent, and the cars will gang up on you if you make too tempting a target. Even better, if you sit back and hide, they'll kill each other off. No one ever said that you have to kill off the other cars. Twisted Metal 4 has 22 cars, 16 levels, including multiplayer arenas, and a load of cheats and codes to keep fans satisfied. And so we definitely just went crazy with putting in codes and cheats and weapons. I wonder, I haven't played Twisted Metal 4 in so long, I have no idea if these were actually in the game or if this is something that Sony supplied to us. This was a 989 joint. Remember, Single Track started the Twisted Metal series, but I don't think they stayed past Twisted Metal 2. So then, 989 took it over. I will say that I feel like the Twisted Metal games, the first one was kind of lightning in a bottle. It was just so different and so weird. It was something that we hadn't really seen before. And then Twisted Metal 2 kind of, to me, perfected that formula. And then after that, it kind of really lost its way. I even feel like looking at the different, having so many different vehicles, and like, they just don't have the personality. They tried, but yeah, the 989 years on Twisted Metal were not amazing. We're still going. Minions Maze. XG's top 10 car picks. Number 1, Sweet Tooth. Number 2, Goggle Eyes. Number 3, Trash Man. Number 4, Mr. Zombie. Number 5, Meter Maid. Number 6, Moon Buggy. Number 7, Minion. Number 8, Orbital. Number 9, Super Thumper. And number 10, Super Auger. You can also build custom cars in here. That's kind of neat. But yeah, so it's a lot of single player stuff in here. And then there are multiplayer levels as well. And yet another game we're going to stuff in here with like 5 pages left to go. Turok Rage Wars. I want to say that Turok Rage Wars, and somebody will probably correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, was mostly a multiplayer focused, which makes sense in a post GoldenEye 007 world, because GoldenEye 007, while it was a great single player game, everyone played it multiplayer. Everyone played it multiplayer. I mean, that's what it was so popular for. So it doesn't surprise me that they would focus on multiplayer with Turok. Turok, of course, was one of those, for a time, uniquely N64 properties. It was one of the early great shooters on the N64, the original Turok, and Turok 2 as well. It was one of those games that just never made the transition out of that generation very well. I remember Craig Kuyava went to a press junket for whatever I think it was the last Turok game, and just they were promising the world. I remember he came back talking about how they were gonna, this was on the PS2, mind you, how you could like mow down rainforests using bullets and stuff like that. Like that's how interactive the world was gonna be. And of course it never was. They never ever sort of reached those heights. So it was a real shame that series sort of died an ignoble death. Anyway, this is from Jim Mazurek. Turok your way to victory. Being labeled as a first-person shooter by some and a pseudo-fighter by others, Turok Rage Wars really sells itself well as a wacky but fun combination of both. It's an FPS for obvious reasons. You crawl through cave-like structures, relentlessly hunting your frag-hungry opponents, and as a fighting game, it requires you to play through each set of stages if you want to unlock all its secrets. Boasting a much cleaner multiplayer mode than Turok 2, Rage Wars still struggles as it tries to grab that ever-elusive title away from the current console FPS king, GoldenEye 007. The extra modes like Monkey Tag and Flag Tag are neat, but they soon grow tiresome and repetitive when compared with the standard deathmatch mode. All in all, it's definitely worth checking out if you don't own a PC. Of course, saying PC shooters were better. This strategy contains multifaceted sections for all of the game's playable characters. Each section contains a level breakdown and shows the corresponding secrets as well. The order in which you choose to play through the characters is up to you. However, the order in which they are listed is the recommended one. Though multiplayer modes will unlock, time trials will become available, etc., this guide stays focused on the trial mode. In other words, we cut off all the fat to give you more meat. Get it? Got it? Good. Now get going. So, clearly there's a single-player mode that gets you all the multiplayer stuff. But you have to play through as a bunch of different characters, including the Raptor. Man, Jurassic Park just had a long reach in the 90s, didn't it? But yeah, Rage Wars. I remember watching Jim play this one as well. I still remember, I loved the first Turok. That was just such a good game. And I wasn't even a big N64 fan, but I was a big fan of Turok. The first one. I should play that remake. And then there were bosses. At the very end of the Manted Soldiers level 3, the last character in the trial mode, you'll unlock the Chest Burster. It's a powerful weapon that comes with both a standard attack and a powered up version. Hitting enemies with either one does decent damage, although we're not quite sure if it's worth the hassle. I love this Ultimate Gaming Rig ad. These ads were all over our magazines for years. I don't know if anyone ever won it. I mean, it obviously seems like a scam, but wow, look at this stuff. Like, versions of this ad appeared for, it felt like years, and the only thing you'd see different was the image on the screen would change, and like various bits of hardware that were sitting in front of the screen would be updated. That's quite the PC. That's quite the case. You know, like you get to PlayStation 2s instead, or a Dreamcast. You see the Dreamcast is actually sitting in. Clearly, they didn't update the picture with the Dreamcast yet. I would love to know if anyone ever won something like this. I feel like it wasn't winnable. I feel like nobody ever won it, but I'm sure all of us remember who were reading magazines in the late 90s, early 2000s, seeing this Ultimate Gaming Rig contest. Has anybody ever entered? Let me know. And here it is on page 140. We got to get Pokemon in the issue, and this is how we did it this time. So, of course, in the previous issues, 1 or 2 issues ago, we covered Pokemon Yellow version, which, of course, was the top-selling game of October 1999. And so this issue, we do a Game Over. Of course, Game Over was a thing that we did every month, where we just outlined the ending of a game. I thought it was cool. I always loved this idea. But, of course, we handled this one. Again, we had to get Pokemon in the issue somehow. We had to have Pokemon on the cover somehow. We had to try to get Pikachu on the cover somehow. And we definitely stretched the bounds of reason to get to have a reason to put Pokemon on the cover multiple times. But this is how we did it this time. And I thought it was great. because the previous two games had come out in '98, so it'd be kind of weird to do a game over for them. Whereas Pokemon Yellow was super hot right now, so it was a perfect time to do it for them. And we do have Pikachu right there. Look. We made it. We did it, everybody. Good job. Good teamwork. When all is said and done, there are two ultimate goals in Pokemon Yellow. First, you want to achieve high levels with a select group of elementally diverse Pokemon so you can challenge all of the gym leaders and beat down all the members of the Elite Four. Of course, it turns into the Elite Five when you're forced to pummel that dork Gary. The second goal is to finally get inside the unknown dungeon so you can capture the volatile Mewtwo. It's a long, winding road, but the payoff is worth it. In the end, you'll find a proud Professor Oak who will induct your elite Pokemon into the Hall of Fame. And then the other thing we did here, obviously, was we'd throw a screenshot in of the ending of another game. I think it was always, I want to say it was always a game we covered in the issue. I think so. And if you could guess it, you send in some mail, and you send in your guess, and you could get an Expert Gamer shirt, which I never got an Expert Gamer shirt, by the way. This is clearly Vandal Hearts 2. So we admit it. This one's pretty easy. If you don't know it, particularly after reading this issue, you should be ashamed. And you call yourself a hardcore gamer? Okay, now we're just being silly. Anyway, you know the deal. Guess the game, pictured it right, and win one of three Expert Gamer t-shirts. Make sure we have your entries no later than January 20th, 2000. To Oak Brook, Illinois. GameCave.com. Did anybody ever order from there? Look at that vinyl figure series for Final Fantasy VIII. Selfie. Excuse me. Selfie. Rinoa. Cypher. Squall. Chips and Bits. I order games from Chips and Bits. Funko Land. I bought a lot of games from Funko Land when I moved there. Next month, February 2000, feature story. Going to be pandemonium on the streets all over again when we tear into Sony's awesome new racing sequel, Gran Turismo 2. Racing fans, get ready. And part 2 of Donkey Kong 64. 500 cars, 20 tracks for Gran Turismo 2. Second halves of Donkey Kong 64 and Tomb Raider: The Last Revelation. Also new stuff like Tomba 2, Fear Effect, and more. Oh, and we've got a little surprise for you Pokemon fans. Did somebody say gold and silver? Well, it's not a surprise if you tell them, John. EGM was covering Crazy Taxi. That was a cool cover, actually. And reviewing Lara's latest and Donkey Kong 64. And, of course, official PlayStation Magazine was going to be covering Gran Turismo 2. I think that was the cover, along with their demo disc. McVan's Video Games. Of course, a Game Shark ad at the very end to close it out. This was happening for months at this point. Game Shark was super popular. It was basically the next level of Game Genie. I was going to say Game Gear. That didn't make any sense. And the back cover. This is now that I'm looking at it, this is the only Sega Dreamcast ad in this issue. That's weird, considering the Dreamcast was only a couple months old by the time this issue went to print, which would have been, late November 1999. So the Dreamcast was just barely 2 months old in the U.S. And, this is a prominent ad spot, but I don't remember seeing any other first-party Sega Dreamcast ads in this issue, now that I'm looking at it. Anyway, but it was with the bigger screenshots again. So that was it. Expert Gamer, issue number 67, for January of 2000. Again, would have been on newsstands in December of 1999. My first issue living full-time in the Chicagoland area. My first issue doing a racing game. My first issue doing a game I'd never played before. I went in completely blind. And again, I have to say, for 140 pages-ish, which included ads and included a beefy tricks section, we managed to fit 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 game strategies into this monthly issue, where there were only 4 editors doing strategies. Pretty proud of the work we were doing, to be honest. We were never ever as popular as Tips and Tricks. That was our main competitor, but I still thought we put together some great stuff. So that's going to do it for this Let's Read. I really hope you've enjoyed this little trip down memory lane. I know it's a little bit weird doing Let's Reads on strategy guides, because I'm not going to sit here and read through every word of a strategy guide, but I hope that you've enjoyed sort of the memories of working on a couple of these games. And again, I want to send a huge thanks to Adrian, aka Todd Zuniga, for sitting and chatting with me and offering some insight into Donkey Kong and WrestleMania 2000 and sort of his memories of working back then. He and I started very close to the same time. I think he was here 1 or 2 issues longer than me before we both moved off at the same time. Him to Official PlayStation Magazine and me to Electronic Gaming Monthly. That was not for a couple more issues. So yeah, I really appreciate him sitting and chatting with me, and he left the door open to do that again. And if you are interested, like I said, I'm going to take we had about a 45-minute discussion that doesn't just sit with Expert Gamer, but also just sort of working it at Ziff Davis in general back in 1999 and 2000, as well as the time that we both spent at EGM and Official PlayStation Magazine, respectively. I'm going to put that together as a future weekly commute. So, of course, if you are a $5 plus patron of this show, you will get that in the coming weeks. So I appreciate you watching for this long. I hope you enjoyed that. Stay tuned again for Expert Gamer number 68. I don't even know what's on the cover, but I'm guessing it's Gran Turismo 2. In the meantime, stay safe, be kind to one another. Thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed this. Please consider supporting us on patreon.com. Remember to check out Twitch TV/Seward. Remember to check out Player One Podcast. And remember to check out other YouTube videos on this channel. Thank you so much for viewing. Leave some comments below. They've been great so far. I love hearing from people who have fond memories of reading these actual magazines. There's some great comments on the previous one, and I'd love to hear more of those. In the meantime, thank you and goodbye.